Eminence front X5 and Larry Wood coming to you from, well, a dry lake bed, much like what you see in the High Plains Drifter, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yes.
Lovely Holly's here with us, and we're going to discuss this really, well, one of my favorite movies ever. I must have watched this movie at least 50 times.
That's what you were telling me. And one of the most intriguing things I find about the film is that it grows more fascinating the more you watch it.
You find different things every time you watch it. I know, it's weird. You would think that you capture everything the first time around, second time around, the 20th time around. I've watched this movie so many times, I don't even count anymore. So, great movie. So you've watched it with me a few times now.
Yes.
And you even heard me last time, like, what the heck was that? You know, and rewinded a couple times to really figure out what's going on in these little scenes. There's little nuggets here and there. But yeah, it's fascinating. You know, one thing that really got me about this movie is, and I just learned this recently from you actually, Clint Eastwood, you know, he's riding in on the credits and whatnot. You know, you see him riding on his horse through the dry lake bed, much like this. Later on, you discover, you know, a crime has been committed. And the deputy or the sheriff of the town he was whipped. He was whipped to death. And that's a different character. I always thought it was Clint Eastwood, but it was a different actor altogether.
It's a different actor.
And the funny thing is, it's actually Clint Eastwood's body double, like a stunt double, stand-in kind of guy. I didn't know that this guy was in the movie. I always thought it was Clint Eastwood, just, you know, maybe it was shot on a weird day where he looked a little different, you know what I mean? Wink, wink. A little too much whiskey the night before. Well, no. The reason why I got him confused is because it's his body double.
Yes, it's his, and the man's name is Buddy Van Horn.
Van Horn.
Yes, Van Horn served as a body double for many of his movies, many of Clint's movies. But in this movie, he's actually cast as an actor. He's cast as Jim Duncan in the film. Jim
Duncan played the character of the sheriff who was whipped to death.
Yes, Van Horn played the character of Jim Duncan, who is later, we believe, returns as Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood never has a name throughout the movie, and High Plains Drifter is actually a ghost story. Jim Duncan is whipped to death. The townsfolk watch the entire murder and do nothing. In fact, they hired the 3 gunslingers to murder this man after this marshal discovered that the claim to the gold, the mining that they were doing, actually the land that claim belonged to the government. So the townsfolk collectively hire 3, would you call them gunslingers?
Yeah, they're gunslingers. Yeah.
Gunslingers to murder Jim Duncan, the marshal, who is has the moral courage to turn in the town and
he's turning in the
what
town.
They've done.
He's turning in the town because it's a mining town, and they're mining. They were mining, or still are mining on government land, which is BLM. But I don't think they had Bureau of Land Management back then, or maybe they did. I don't know. But to have a legit mining operation, you need to have permits to do so. And you can't just say, okay, this land is mine. You have to claim it, and then once you stake a claim, you can then mine on that land. It looks like they didn't have the proper paperwork to be mining on that land. Almost like claim jumping. So, and that's when people just start mining on other people's claims. It's not allowed, it's like stealing. That's what Jim Duncan discovered, that this mining company in Lago Mining Company was doing. They were on land that was not staked as theirs, staked literally. So yeah, that's the underlying toe of the story at the beginning. But what's really amazing is it's really a ghost story, or a supernatural kind of story, because at the beginning of the movie, as the credits are rolling, there's a scene where Clint Eastwood's character, who has no name in this movie, is riding his horse through a cemetery near Lago, just outside of Lago, like a stone's throw. You see the camera, tracking him a little bit as he's moving forward to the camera, going through the cemetery, but then you see what they call a rack focus, where the focus goes from either close to far or far to close, and things become clear or blurry depending on how the rack focus is working. Field of view, or the focal point, is changing from being more in the horizon to more up front. Just as he passes the cemetery, he's kind of off screen now, but you see the rack focus happen in the cemetery. And to me, I think that's the beginning of when Clint Eastwood's character, with the gunslinger with no name, becomes possessed by, I think, Jim Duncan.
And I think that even before that, the director, Clint Eastwood, the opening shot of the film, automatically it sets a supernatural tone to the movie.
Oh yeah, the music. Yeah.
Yes.
Elaborate on that.
Well, here is this, Clint Eastwood rides out of this shimmering heat wave in this, it's this mirage-like, eerie, shimmering, kind of spectral opening shot that it opens with this tone that I've never seen in any Western. It's a supernatural tone, and the music is eerie. It's very eerie, and to me it sounds like the keening of a haunted soul. It's unusual music. I've never heard music like that, nor in this genre, where the music for me is an actual character in the film. It's almost like it says what Clint Eastwood's silence does not, and it's the inner anguish of this haunted soul is reflected in the musical score. That's how I feel about the music. That's subjective, but I feel this howling throughout the film. This and the loneliness of that soul as well.
It's very iconic, that song, or that music, or the whole soundtrack. It's very iconic to that movie, and it's from start to finish. You get this eerie feeling all throughout the movie when the music starts. It's kind of overwhelming in some spots, but I agree with you 100%. It's a little spooky.
It's a little spooky.
It's a little spooky. That same theme is playing when Clint Eastwood's making his entrance in the opening credits.
Right.
I find that fascinating.
So we have this opening shot of this specter coming out of this simmering heat, and he suddenly just materializes. And in the end of the movie, the director, Clint, will bookmark that. He rides in, and then at the end of the movie, the character will ride out and back. He will dematerialize and melt into that same simmering heat, just as he appeared, almost like a mirage, a vision. So the film is opened with that tone, the music, the heat wave, the type of eerie mirage effect. You already have that. So by the time he's passing, and it's a very short, what do you call it, scene from one to the next. Mm-hmm. It happens very quickly. He then passes through the cemetery, and because you were explaining how the shot is out of focus and comes into focus, that gives us a sense that something is passing through, something unseen is passing through the cemetery. It's like
something's following him.
Yeah. And
or leaving the cemetery and maybe possessing him. Who knows?
Possessing it, or being possessed. The character is now being possessed by something. The tombstones symbolizing something dead possessing this
Something coming out of the grave.
something coming out of the grave.
So yeah, that's the cemetery. That's the opening credits, the cemetery, and the music.
Yeah.
And it really sets the tone for the entire movie. Clint's character, though, you can tell, he looks like a gunslinger, he's dressed like a gunslinger, he talks like a gunslinger, and he handles himself like a gunslinger. I believe he really was a gunslinger that was possessed by the sheriff, the previous sheriff who was killed.
The marshal.
The marshal. Was it the marshal? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Duncan.
Yeah,
poor guy.
And by the way, you need one of those dust jackets. I think it would really suit you.
Oh, goodness.
I think you would look great in a dust jacket.
Oh, maybe. Maybe when I make it big someday, I can afford clothing.
Your dust jacket, they're made for you, the dust jacket.
A wardrobe of sorts. I don't know. Okay, so also, when you watch this movie, take note of when they use a handheld camera. I think the handheld camera point of view is more...
It's more intimate.
Like a spirit. Like a third witness to what's going on, but it can't be seen by anyone. It's a floating camera. You're not really it's not in the scene. But I think it's supposed to be the viewpoint of another spirit of some sort watching what's going on. I think that's interesting. Very interesting. But that's the handheld. Now, as the movie, progresses in the opening parts, there's a scene where Clint goes to get a shave, which I need, by the way. I forgot to shave. Why did I bring that up? Yeah.
Before that, I want to bring up, before he goes to get shaved, I want to bring up another very subtle clue. It's a subtle clue.
Clue of what?
That this is a ghost.
Oh, like a...
Or this is a person possessed by Duncan.
Right.
In order to serve Duncan's revenge. That's when he's riding through town. And all you hear as he's riding through town are the horse's hooves. It's very deliberate. This is all you hear until you hear the sound of a whip. And that whip, Clint has a very strong reaction to the sound of the whip. He immediately turns his head, snaps his head, and there's a slight flinch, which is rare for Eastwood to flinch at anything, right? The character of Duncan has been whipped to death, brutally whipped to death. And it's almost like this is a PTSD type of reaction in modern terms. That's another subtle clue that that the Clint Eastwood character and the Marshall character are one and the same in soul, if not in physical body.
Okay, so he goes into a saloon. He has an encounter with some hired guns, some other gunslingers who are taking place of the sheriff? No, there's a sheriff in town, but these gunslingers are to protect the town from 3 other gunslingers who actually did the whipping of the sheriff. What? Yeah. So the town is basically hiring gunslingers to protect the town or their interests. And Duncan was about the deputy, the sheriff.
Duncan was the marshal.
The marshal had some information that was going to shut down the mining firm or syndicate and pretty much shut the whole town down. So they got rid of him by whipping him to death. They hired people to do that. Those same people, those same 3 guys, end up going to prison, a territorial prison out in the middle of nowhere, out in the Great Plains. Now, because they're getting out soon, those 3 guys were set up by the town. They got rid of those guys. They killed the marshal. They got rid of the 3 bad guys. But they hired another 3 bad guys to protect the town against the 3 bad guys that are getting out of jail in 6 months. Well, it's that 6-month period now. And that's when all this is taking place. They're prepping for these 3 bad guys to come back to town. Well, Clint Eastwood, his character, shows up, probably possessed by Jim Duncan. And he's got the skills, but he also has the knowledge of what goes on in that town, which is really interesting. It's almost as if Clint Eastwood's character can predict what's going to happen into the future. And if you take that kind of mindset, he's got foreknowledge of what's going on. Is that the right term? Foreknowledge? He's got a peek into the future. It's the best way I can explain it. But through that, he decides to leave the saloon because he goes to the saloon. He meets these three guys, and there's this weird altercation. Not altercation, but there's this interaction between these three guys, which obviously shows you that Clint Eastwood is a much sharper gunslinger than these three guys all put together. Okay, so he kind of gives up on it, gives him his peace of mind, and walks across the street to get his hair cut and a shave and a bath, I think is what he was looking for. Mm-hmm. And this is an interesting scene because, there's a lot of baiting going on, a lot of luring into a trap that's going on with this character of Clint Eastwood, the no-name character. Mm-hmm. He puts his jacket on the coat rack inside the barber shop, and he also puts his gun belt onto the coat rack. And you find out during this scene at the barber shop that he keeps his gun on him, even though he puts his gun belt on the rack. He has put a fake gun handle into his holster where his gun would go to make it look like there's really a gun in it. Well, he's baiting the people across the street, the three guys across the street at the saloon, watching what he's doing and realizing these three guys realize he's put his gun belt on this coat rack. That's when they take action. These three bad guys these gunslingers go over to the barber shop thinking this guy's unarmed, when in fact he is, and there's a gunfight that ensues from that. I find that interesting because you don't know what's going on. Like, how did he get his gun? He put his gun belt on the coat rack. What's going on? If you watch closely, towards the end of that scene, you see him taking out the dummy gun, the gun butt. I guess it's the butt of the gun, the handle part.
The handle.
That's all it is. There's nothing left. You obviously see him pulling it out and putting his real gun back in. And it just blew me away when I saw that. I saw that for the first time, I think, 2 viewings ago. I didn't pick up on it for all these years. I don't know why.
He's setting them up to be killed. Thank you. He's setting them up to be killed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they try to provoke him in the bar. The three gunslingers who have been hired by the townspeople to protect them from the gunslingers they hired to kill Jim Duncan.
A lot of hiring people to kill other people that they hired to kill people.
And that's part of the hypocrisy of the town, which we'll get to later. They're kind of like, we wash our hands of this, we're not guilty, and yet they're hiring people to murder other people.
It's crazy.
And part of the reason why Clint Eastwood also, he calls them out on their hypocrisy, that the whole movie's on that as well. He's in the bar. They try to provoke him, the gunslingers. He doesn't take the bait.
He baits them.
He turns the tables.
He baits them.
He waits.
I think that's amazing, that scene. The way he handles himself.
The way in typical Clint Eastwood fashion, calm, cool, collected, menacing, and the way he walks with authority.
Yeah.
And yet it's he's menacing. This is a guy you look at and you don't mess with. You don't mess with this man. He has a presence, and the whole movie, it's his presence, I feel, carries every movie he's in. We'll get to that later. So yes, I agree.
He's got a sidekick that he later picks up in this movie.
Yes.
His name is
Mordecai.
And now there's some biblical background to the name of Mordecai.
Yes.
Is it biblical? I don't know.
It
Religious?
is biblical.
It is biblical.
And Mordecai, I believe, yes, he's a king's servant.
I see.
In the Bible, I don't have the verse in front of me, but Mordecai is a servant to the king, is intimate with the king, and this man's a dwarf. He becomes the kind of, he helps Clint, aids Clint, and is made sheriff of the town and mayor of the town when the town offers the character of Clint Eastwood carte blanche.
Anything he wants.
Anything he wants. And if he will now, well, I'm getting ahead of myself because he kills the gunslingers, so that they no longer have a way to protect themselves.
Yeah, he gets rid of their safeguard basically
Right.
against the 3 bad guys that are coming.
Right.
But Clint Eastwood pretty much puts all 3 of these guys down, within 2 seconds, literally. About 2 seconds passes by and 3 guys are dead. So within 5 minutes of him coming into town, 3 people are dead.
Yeah.
And it's the gunslingers of all people who are dead. So the town is exposed and they're a little concerned. And they then ask Clint Eastwood's character to, they want to hire him as the gunslinger.
To protect
the
them.
town, yeah.
Yeah.
So they give him carte blanche, and you can watch the movie and see how all this spell out. But basically, he's baiting the whole town. He knows the whole town, not necessarily the gunslinger Clint, but the character who's possessed. The possession seems to have all that knowledge inside of him. It's hard to comprehend what's going on, but during the possession of Clint Eastwood's character, all those memories and all that knowledge comes as well. But Clint keeps his gunslinging skills, which is really interesting. It's like, what?
Yeah.
So it's a neat blend of a marshal and a gunslinger put together, and that's Clint's character in this. It's a hybrid. It's really kind of spooky. It's almost like a Halloween cowboy movie.
Well, one of the things that fascinates me about the film, he really doesn't have to. Everyone really kills themselves. He exposes the town by allowing their hypocrisy, and because they're always talking about faith, and they're always talking about they're bringing up religious themes, talking about their faith, and basically they're good people. Even their own sheriff says these are good people, these are God-fearing people.
Right.
But what Clint does is he simply allows them all to kill themselves because their greed kills them. They betray each other constantly, and they get into each other's throats. And everything that happens is a result of their own agenda, their own greed, everything that happens to them. So he doesn't have to do much, really. He does do a lot, but the gunslingers provoke him, and of course he reacts. So they die.
Yeah, something else that happens shortly after. Well, you understand that Clint Eastwood, Jim Duncan, the marshal, prior to Clint showing up and being possessed by Jim, the marshal, there's scenes where he's being whipped. And in that scene where he's recollecting, Jim is recollecting what's going on there.
Wait, this is important. It's not Jim recollecting.
It's Clint.
It's Clint Eastwood.
He's recollecting, but it's through the memory of Jim, the possession of Jim. That's why I meant those things come over in the possession. All those memories come over. So Clint Eastwood's resting, and he starts dreaming and remembering what was going on. And during that whipping scene, the whole town is watching what's going on because they hired these 3 gunslingers to basically kill the marshal. And the marshal is asking for help during this whipping, and nobody budges. No one moves. They're just watching what's going on. And he says, "What? See you in hell."
He says, "Go to hell."
He says, "Go to hell. Go to hell. See you in hell." And that's kind of critical in the movie to see this scene because, one, the whole town is guilty now. They all have a hand in what's going on because none of them actually helped, except one person who tried to help. And it's key to actually watch who that person is. And we'll let them figure that out if they haven't already. But it's really key. That scene is key. It's very short, but it's key, and it kind of echoes throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Mordecai, Jim Duncan. There's this religious undertow going on, but you can't quite figure out, is Clint a good guy or a bad guy?
The whole movie is a biblical, it's an allegory.
Yeah.
And it's of this soul who has not been able to rest because he was murdered and betrayed by the people that he was sworn to protect. And he's their marshal. They betrayed him and had him murdered in a brutal way through a whipping with bullwhips. And but I want to get back to that scene.
He was also buried in an unmarked grave, which is important too to understand.
Yes, and we'll get to that later because that's also tied into what you were saying about the other character who is the one redeeming character in the entire movie.
Actually, there's a couple. There's two. Mordecai being one of them.
Mordecai. But I want to get to that scene where Clint Eastwood lies down to rest. And it almost looks like he's dreaming, but it's not a dream. He's recollecting. He is remembering his own murder. And it's through the perspective of Jim Duncan. So that's key to me, that this is a ghost story. Because why would he be reliving memories that aren't his if he's not Jim Duncan? If he hasn't been possessed by the ghost spirit of Jim Duncan, why would he even know about how Jim Duncan begged for help? He didn't just ask for help. He begged for help. Which is also uncharacteristic for Clint to beg for anything. So it must have been pretty brutal. And the whole movie is vicious. There's a viciousness to the violence. A lot of the westerns or a lot of movies nowadays, they're extremely violent. But this movie has a viciousness that it really is unsettling and very realistic that other films just don't have. I found that for me. It was hard to watch, actually, a lot of the scenes.
It's a little intense. There's some very controversial scenes in this, which I don't even want to bring up in this review. But there's some pretty intense, scenes there. That's why it's rated R. But so this movie, there's a lot of weirdness that goes on that could only be explained by like a supernatural being or entity possessing this gunslinger, Clint Eastwood's character, which again has no name, partly because he doesn't know his name. He knows the marshal's name because the marshal's possessing him, but the name of this town is interesting as well.
Yes, it is.
That Clint rides into. It's called Lago, Lago, and I'm ignorant to a lot of this stuff because I don't know Spanish. I don't know the Bible I don't know it at all, actually. I just know it says Bible on the outside of the cover. I've never really broken into it. But you've studied it quite a bit for the writing that you do. You've studied it quite a bit. And you mentioned that Lago has a different kind of meaning in biblical terms. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
can you explain that?
Lago means lake in Spanish. And in Revelations in the Bible, there is a lake of fire that is referred to several times. It's also referred to in Matthew. And this lake of fire is in the Christian end times, supposed to be where the devil and the false prophets and the beast. These are all Revelation terms, characters. They're thrown into this lake of fire, of sulfur and brimstone. It's a lot of people, they believe that hell and this lake of fire are the same. They're synonymous, but they're not. Hell and the lake of fire are two separate things. And the lake of Lago, the town is called Lake. And it's situated upon a lake, which Larry has been to this location on an aside. And
we should go back there.
I'd love to go back.
There's places I need to see. Like, there's some dunes out there in Mono Lake that I don't even know about.
I didn't know where they were.
I couldn't find them. But yeah, now I want to go out and I have a better head on my shoulders now. I could probably find it. But yeah, I need to find those dunes, or at least the beach. Looks like dunes to me. Anyway. Didn't mean to distract. But yeah, well, Lago.
Right, and in the Bible, this lake, the lake of fire, is made of sulfur and brimstone.
And to add to that sulfur and brimstone, I think Mono Lake is an old caldera from a volcano.
Yeah, exactly.
Lake of fire. Talk about lake of fire. It comes from that, but yeah.
Yeah, it was born out of a lake of fire.
And if you look at the background in this movie, you'll see little volcano cones in the background. Those really exist out there. It's very volcanic. Well, it's part of the Sierras. It's very turbulent. There's a lot of pressure going on underground and a lot of molten lava. But yeah.
Yes,
Sorry.
And Clint's character, he uses dynamite, and he basically starts burning down the town. And before that, he has the whole town as part of his carte blanche. He can do whatever he wants in exchange for protecting them against the gunslingers who are being released from prison, who they hired to kill Jim Duncan. Anyway, he has them paint the town red, completely red, even the church, and especially as he says, the church. And then he writes over the sign Lago Hell in red. He renames the town Hell, and then he uses dynamite to start blowing it up. By the end of the movie, the town is on fire. Dynamite is comprised, there's a component of sulfur in it.
Well,
right?
He's not using dynamite to blow up the town.
No.
But he does utilize dynamite to fight off people who are trying to attack him once in a while. Like he rides out to see these three bad guys coming back to town to get their revenge on the town for putting them in jail after killing Duncan. It's so weird. Mm-hmm. So he rides out to see these guys, and he's really messing with them. I went to this filming location as well. The dynamite scene, shootout scene with the three gunslingers with Clint Eastwood. There's no way Clint Eastwood's character could make it all the way around these gunslingers in movie land, in Hollywood land, or even in real life. You go out there, you look at this situation that Clint is depicting out there, you have to be supernatural to do what this character is doing, to get around the way he does, the speed in which he goes from one hillside to the next when the gunslingers are down there trying to shoot him, you know. He's tossing dynamite. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. And another interesting thing is that location is just on the other side of the hill of where Lago is, the town, which I did a video on. Details dumb up. I don't know. Check it out. It's High Plains Drifter movie locations. You should see my video pop up if you do. Yeah, simple. Enough plugging, Larry.
Well, one thing I really enjoyed about your video is you actually point out where some of these scenes take place.
Mm-hmm.
The scene where, yeah, that fascinates me. The scene where the Clint is above the released gunslingers who he's been hired actually to kill, but he doesn't kill them. He provokes them.
Yeah, he's provoking these gunslingers. He's poking the beehive. Okay, he's really upsetting these guys. They're really upset. You know, he shoots one guy's ear off.
Yeah,
Okay.
he shoots a zero.
And he throws dynamite down there, and the rock splatter hits all these guys, and one guy at the end has rocks embedded in his skin. It's like,
I didn't notice that.
yeah,
Really?
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
see
What's his
that.
name? Stacy. Stacy
Oh,
has
Stacy.
has
Okay.
particles of rock in his face.
It's gross.
It's a fascinating place to be. To know that Clint Eastwood was there and the whole crew is filming out there. It's just a cool feeling to be out there on that set.
So by the end of the movie, just quickly, let me finish up on
one more thing about the lake.
the lake.
Only one character touches that lake. And at the end, you kind of see that, and I think we're approaching that, but only one character touches that lake, and it's the corporate guy. And you guys know how I feel about corporate. I do not like corporate America. I forgot the gentleman's name. Drake, I think his name, Dave Drake, is the...
That's the character's
That's
name.
the character's name, Dave Drake. He is the mining company's head guy, and because he's part of this big, huge mining syndicate, he has a lot of power in what's going on in the town, because the town feeds off the mining. So without the mining, the town doesn't exist. So he's kind of like the mayor, but he's not. He's just this big corporate guy who's running the town because he has got this clout, this leverage over the town through the mining activity that's going on. Because without the mining, this town wouldn't exist.
Right.
He's the reason why Duncan was killed. He's the reason why those 3 gunslingers were hired. He was the reason why the second set of gunslingers were hired and killed by Clint Eastwood's character. He's driving this town into the ground, basically. He's the only guy who touches that lake. He touches it in a very, almost a sad way, but not really. He's shot by Stacy as he's trying to run away at the end of the movie. He's trying to make a getaway, and he's the guy who gets shot and put into the lake. And that's kind of, is that telling? Does that say anything about the lake to you as a study?
Here we have, and let me paint the scene with the town is now on fire. It's dark. It's on fire, and
Well, this happens during the day.
yes, the shooting of Drake happens during the day.
The initial attack on
The
the town
initial
by the 3 bad
happens
guys come
during the
back
day.
to town, and they're just wrecking it, and people are trying to escape, and one of them is
Right.
Drake. He's trying to make his getaway with his money and get out of town. Well, they stop him and they kill him, put him in the water. Holy cow! But is there meaning to that?
Well, the visual that I'm seeing, and yes, that scene happens, excuse me, in the daytime. But here we have a town called Lago, which means lake. It's now on later on you see it on fire. It smells like sulfur due to the dynamite that Clint's been throwing. And so the whole thing is this allegory because he's painted hell on the sign. They ride into hell, and it's all red. The whole town has been painted red. The sign says hell on it in red. And the 3 gunslingers who Clint has been hired to kill, those men, again, they killed Duncan. They're riding into town. They then kill Drake. He falls into the lake. They shoot him, and he falls into the lake. He's the only one who falls into the lake. He could be, you said when we watched it, he could be the devil type of figure that is tossed into the lake.
The corporate guy being the devil figure, the evil.
The devil figure, because in the Bible, the devil is thrown into the lake and is tormented forever. So this man, if he represents the devil of the town, is thrown into the lake. And then you really get that sense of hell, lake of fire imagery, all of these biblical imageries. And Clint is set, his figure is set, his silhouette is lit by these flames. the whole thing.
He looks like the devil
He
reincarnated.
himself looks like something out of hell. It again adds to the whole specter.
And it's a
kind of
really
image.
you're really torn whether Clint's character is the devil, an evil spirit,
Yeah.
or if he's a redeeming spirit. He's someone that's coming to make the town realize what they've done, and maybe they can deal with it internally, or like Drake, run away, and get killed. But it's an interesting scene when he's standing there, not knowing whether he's a devil or not. It makes you think, but you're kind of rooting for the devil if that's the case, if he is indeed the devil, or if he's a good spirit and he's just making the town grow up a bit. Because during the whole movie, you hear him saying, "Oh my gosh, these guys are cowards. These guys don't know how to stick up for themselves. They need to grow up." Blah blah blah. And I'm kind of behind that. You kind of look at the town in a weak state. You don't look at them as a bunch of people who can overpower 3 gunslingers just by sheer number. They couldn't even do that. I mean, Clint tried training them in what to do. They still wouldn't do it because they're afraid to kill anything. That's why they're always hiring gunslingers come in and kill people. And he's kind of putting an end to that.
Well, one of the things that I like about the movie is the unease that the movie creates, because you're rooting for Clint, yet Clint plays a brutal character. He's not Mr. Knight in shining armor here.
Right.
The character that Clint Eastwood plays, he's a brutal character. He's not all good. He's got
issues.
Viciousness in him as well. They basically hired a wolf to protect them from other wolves. And
they hired a super wolf.
What did he say? He was they hired the alpha wolf.
Yes.
Which he brings up to another character. I'm the lead dog.
Yeah.
And this is the character Vera Bloom, which is the redeeming character other than Mordecai in the town. When we first see her character, Sarah Belding is the name of the character. When we first see her, she is pictured in the hotel on the balcony above the rest of the characters. She is the other redeeming character other than Mordecai in the town. And I think she symbolizes the conscience, human conscience, like what is right, the moral conscience. And because she calls out, first of all, she was the only one who tried to save Jim Duncan. She was out of all of them, the rest of the town just watched. And they had hired, a reminder, they had hired the 3 gunslingers to kill the marshal. And the town just watches as this brutal murder, as he begs them. The marshal begs them for help. But she is the only one who tries to help him and pleads for the others to help him, and she's stopped and shoved back inside one of the hotel.
Her husband stops
Her husband stops her. When the character of Clint rides into town, she is portrayed above the rest. And her standing on the balcony, or she's up on another level, but she's above all the other characters in the film, and her character consistently hovers around Clint's character throughout the film.
She's watching.
She's always,
while she's working, she's watching him, kind of thing.
She's watching him. And she also, she calls out her husband. She calls out Clint. And she, throughout the film, she's calling out Clint, saying things, well, if your conscience, saying things like, if your conscience lets you sleep. To which he makes some sort of typical Clint Eastwood response that, But she's calling him out. She continues to call him out throughout the film, and she calls out her husband as well.
He's baiting her because she's married to the hotel owner. She's the wife of the owner of the hotel.
Owner.
And he is baiting her because he knows, as the character Duncan, the possession, this guy Duncan, baiting her basically to sleep with him because he knows that she has issues with her husband. because she has this moral level that's way above her husband, but yet she has to bow to her husband's wishes because she's the wife back in the day. And, they didn't have a lot of rights, a lot of things were different back then, but she's standing out. And in a way, he's encouraging her to move on, in my eyes, when I watch that movie. When she sleeps with him, it's like he's asking her to move on. And she does it. She does move on, because after that happens is when she tells her husband she's leaving and she's not coming back. That's pretty powerful for her to say that. As a woman, back in that time period, it's hard to be a woman and single and moving around like, in the Wild West, They didn't have anything to stand on, but she's got some class, she's got a good conscience. She's doing the right thing, and she helps where she can. And even the preacher, early on in the movie, when the hotel's owner, his barn is being torn down because Clint has hired these guys to rip the barn down. The preacher, in that conversation with the owner, mentions how great his wife is and how awesome it is to have a wife like that, who's so uplifting and so spiritually connected and such a good person, but yet she's married to this guy. It's so messed up, and Clint breaks that, and I like that part of the movie.
Well, one of the things I like about the movie is the unease that it creates in the viewer, because Clint's character, it's not this one-dimensional character of this is the knight in shining armor who's going to run and come into town and save us. He's a brutal man. This is a brutal man. And there's something, he doesn't need to say a word, and there's something menacing about him. You get this sense that anything could happen around him, and that and he gets called out. He gets called out by the Sarah Belding character, where she flat out says to the man, basically, I don't know how you sleep at night. I don't know. I don't know how you sleep at night. And to which he has this Clint Eastwood type of response,
Maybe you'd like to find out.
Well, exactly, that kind of thing, But she calls him out, and she, to me, in this biblical allegory of a movie, she represents moral conscience.
Yeah.
She calls out not only Clint, but her husband, who and the town in general, and says, we were complicit in the murder of Jim Duncan. We sat and watched. It takes her a while, though, to get to this point.
They sat and watched, and they hired.
And she's the only character who tried to do something about the murder of Jim Duncan. She comes out of the hotel and starts, in the recollections of Clint Eastwood character, she comes out of the hotel and says, stop, as Jim Duncan is begging for help. She comes out and says, let's help this man, let's help him.
Well, she doesn't say it, but her actions are that she's running to help him, and her husband stops her.
I believe she actually says it. I believe I actually heard her say, we've got to do something. Okay. Yeah.
Not that that's important, but yeah.
Well, to me it's important because she not only, she vocalizes it so they can hear it. Here's a voice saying this,
Okay.
And then she continues as the voice of conscience in the movie. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to add.
Okay. Watch this movie, folks. It's not your typical Western. This is This is more of a ghost story than it is a Western, and I think we can all take a lot away from that movie.
I think it stands alone in the Western genre. I think it stands alone, and I think that its themes, they continue to recur in Clint Eastwood's films. Pale Rider, just the title, Pale as a Ghost. That character, I haven't seen the film yet, but that character is also this unnamed character. When you don't have a name to a character, you leave it open symbolically to who it could be, what it could represent.
Or what they're hiding.
And what I like is that becomes bigger than the movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Clint Eastwood, to him, I get the sense it's not just a movie to Clint. He's trying to make a statement. And through these recurring themes of sin, guilt, the avenging angel, and the retribution, and later in his career, atonement. In a way, he's atoning for his own character, because his own character does brutal things. Certainly in Plains Drifter.
Mm-hmm.
So Clint is offers then Unforgiven. I want to see that. I'd love to see that and relate that to the other films. That would be really fun to do. Yeah. So that's
Unforgiven, Pale Rider, all these things can come up in the conversation.
Yes.
In the future. But yeah, I think the next one we should do is Pale Rider.
Definitely Pale
It's
Rider.
a great movie.
Yeah.
Let's touch on one last thing, and that's the cemetery scene as Clint's leaving. So at the end of this movie, Clint is, leaving town. He's going through the cemetery again, and Mordecai is there, working on a headstone, and he looks up to Clint and asks him, I still don't know your name. Typical Clint fashion? Yes, you do. And he rides off. And then the departing scene is the zooming in of Jim Duncan's headstone. And from that point on, you see Clint walking or riding his horse into the desert, riding off into the desert in this similar opening scene, but in reverse. He's leaving town now. And he just fades off. He disappears like his spirit has been rested. He goes into the magical world of the after death world, whatever that might be, the magical after death kind of place to be. I don't know. It just seems like a nice way to shut it down, to shut that whole. There can't be a part two because the spirit's at rest now. There might be other movies where something like this happens, but this character is put to rest, and the character that originally started as Clint Eastwood's No Name, go off and be his own self again, his own gunslinger, and just do the wreckage. Maybe that's part two. I don't know.
Well, leading up to the scene with Mordecai, he passes Sarah Belding, who is leaving town. She's packed, ready to go. She's got this beautiful dress on, Western, with some Western attire. Beautiful. She looks great. She's ready to leave.
Beautiful dress.
Yes. And we're reminded of her words when she woke up after her and Clint made love. Her words to him were, out of the blue, she brings up Jim Duncan. And she begins talking about how, they say that a spirit cannot rest if its grave is unmarked. Mm-hmm. So he passes her. They acknowledge each other like we've shared a moment, and now we're both on our way, kind of thing. And then he comes upon Mordecai, we don't see what he is engraving onto the headstone of this grave. He's just at work on a headstone. It could be anybody because there's been so many people killed in the town. Anyway, then that line of who are you? Mordecai says, I never got your name. That's it. Yeah. And Clint's answer, you know who I am. Basically, you know who I am, or you know my name. That's it. You know my name. And then the camera zooms in on the name that has just freshly been put on the headstone, and we realize it is Jim Duncan's grave that was formerly had no marker. Now it has a marker. Now Clint Eastwood can ride off, go back into that simmering mirage-like heat wave. His spirit can dissipate and go and he can leave. His spirit, you said, it can rest now.
Yeah.
Now that's interesting because what I'm thinking is, but I don't think Clint Eastwood's spirit the man, Clint Eastwood, the director, ever rests, because he keeps going.
That's it. Yeah, well,
Well, the theme keeps going, though.
as we just said.
Right.
Yeah.
He continues
Pale
the
Rider, The
theme into the
Forgiven, yeah.
movies. He rides on, you
Yeah.
know? So, yeah, maybe the character spirit rests, Jim Duncan's, but I don't think Clint's does. And that's what I want to explore in these other films.
Coming to a conversation near you.
And please,
No. Seriously, though, it's been great talking with you folks. One thing I have to add here at the end, for those who've made it this far, there's going to be a live stream in about half an hour. So stay tuned for that. Wednesday, there's going to be a live stream.
yes,
Right after
yes.
this has premiered, we'll have a live stream. So we can all sit here and chat, talk, all of us, right? All of us. So tune in for that, coming in 30 minutes after this is done. Thank you for joining us for this second episode of The Conversation, which I'm really digging this. I don't know. Leave your comments down below if you like this kind of format. If you want to see more of it, we'll do live streams, we'll do produced videos like this. Down below, leave your comment. Tell us how you like it or don't like it, or what we should do next, or anything like that, please.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Oh,
And
this is
I'm glad you
fun.
liked the High Plains Drifter. I'm glad you got to see a little bit more of what I've been seeing over the years, through watching it over and over again. I just love this movie. Heck, I'm going to go watch it again today.
You
after
know
talking
what,
about
though? You remind me of Clint Eastwood.
Oh, God.
No, really, because there are certain expressions that Clint makes, and he's got that squinty eye thing going on, which you have going on. He's very tight-lipped and closed-mouthed, and that reminds me of you as well. So honestly,
I'm flattered.
you're
Clint, if you're watching this, I'm flattered. Because, I idolize this guy. This guy, Clint
remind
Eastwood.
me of Clint Eastwood.
He's a good guy. He's a hard
we
worker.
need to get you a dust jacket.
I need to interview him. If you guys have any connections, I'd love to interview this guy. I would like to ask him specifically about this movie. A lot
Yes,
of questions
I would like
about this
that.
movie and why
I
he
would
did
like to
certain
do that.
things. Like that rack focusing going on in the cemetery scene at the entrance of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a hint that, there's a supernatural being leaving the cemetery, going into Clint's character? I don't know. Eminence front, X5. Yeah, it's still here. I broke it, by the way. I broke it again.
Yeah, you broke it.
I
again.
broke the front sway bar end link.
Well, that's why you're so good at fixing things, because you break
I
everything.
break everything I own.
You break everything.
My sunglasses, you probably wonder, why isn't he wearing sunglasses?
You
Those are
broke
really
his
nice.
sunglasses,
I
too.
stepped on them. I broke them clean in half.
You broke your camera once, too, didn't you?
Yeah. I drove over my camera. Actually, the camera that's in there right now is
Yeah.
brand new.
Well, that's why you're
It was
so
Wandering
good at
Jeepsy.
fixing
Her and I were
things.
doing a collaboration, and I left my camera on her Jeep tire. Big old tires, I was like, waiting for her to get back from her part of the recording. And, well, I forgot it was on the tire. I went into her vehicle and we drove off. And, because it felt like we just ran over something. Yeah, we did. It was my camera.
It's the camera.
My guys, that was my fault. Anyway, Eminence front X5 and Larry Wirtz signing off. Thank you.
Oh, it was so fun.
Thank you.
Super fun.
We're going to be back with you next week, probably with another conversation.
He needs
Pale
a
Rider.
dust jacket. He needs a dust jacket.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you do.
I don't.
And sunglasses.
I need a lot of things, but not those things.
The dust jacket.
No.
I like it.
Toya Sequoia, a trailer, before all that.
Dust jacket
No.
first.
Blah, blah.